talk about AVID. AVID stands for Advancement via Individual Determination. Long time ago, when I worked in the school district world, I was a director for AVID, and I was responsible for managing the AVID program for the entire school district. That meant I dealt with the budget, had to do teacher training on a regular basis, monitoring the curriculum, things like that. And I managed AVID for 8 different schools, several programs across the district. It was a lot, to say the least. Now, when I got into the role, I didn't know anything about AVID. I didn't know anything at all about AVID, and I'm finding a lot of my students, when we talk about AVID in our classes, they don't really know what AVID is either. That's because AVID tends to be an attractive program for schools that are Title I, low income. They're not usually found in some of your higher upper middle class schools, although I'm not saying that they shouldn't be there. They absolutely should be there, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But let's talk about what is AVID, how it came to be, and I'll give you some of my thoughts and opinions on it. So first of all, AVID was founded, as a lot of these things are, by a teacher in California back in the 1980s when she was working with groups of students, and she found that these students lacked a certain set of soft skills that, frankly, the rest of us kind of take for granted that they should know before they get into school. The reality is they don't know these soft skills, and she identified 5 specific soft skills that's kind of the foundation of everything that AVID does, and it's called WICOR. W-I-C-O-R, WICOR. WICOR stands for writing, inquiry, collaboration, organization, and reading, particularly reading critically. So what she thought is that in order to bring, tide raises all ships. In order to do that, she needed to sort of figure out a way to get these soft skills into her teaching, into her curriculum, so that the students that were struggling in some of these areas would improve elsewhere throughout the school. Now, what she found is that it wasn't the lowest of the low students that needed these skills and strategies, and it certainly wasn't the highest of the high students that needed these strategies. They already had them. It was the bubble group, a smaller group of students that just could go either way. They're either going to be successful or they're not going to be successful. The bubble kids. And that's really who AVID is for. That's who they advertise to. That's the sort of student that they want in their courses. Kids that could very easily slip through the cracks if nobody is looking. Now, let's be honest here. Not everybody told us or taught us how to take notes or how to organize. And I'll focus on that one here because that's one of those things we sort of take for granted. Some kids come in with that skill, some kids do not. And trust me, it's likely not part of your school's curriculum to stop and let's teach how to take notes, guys. To be honest with you, I didn't really learn how to take notes until I got to college. And I had to figure that out for myself. How much better of a student could I have been if someone had showed me some ways to take notes? And there are hundreds of ways to take notes. What AVID chooses to do is they teach their students how to use Cornell notes. Now, I don't like Cornell notes. You can Google it and try to find an example of what Cornell notes looks like. But it works for AVID because it provides a place for students to take notes and then ask questions about their learning and their thinking as they're going along. It kind of dives in and clicks into that metacognitive skill, which is kind of important. And it fits into that inquiry where they want students to ask questions and think about their learning. So it's not horrible. I just think it's complicated and takes a lot of work, but it's required as part of the AVID curriculum. But that's just one of those examples of we don't teach students to take notes. It's not something that we commonly do. But if we did give students that soft skill, the ability to take notes or to organize a notebook, which is also an AVID skill, they want their students to know how to organize notebooks. If we taught them how to do that, how to organize, how to collaborate, how to work together, how to take notes in class, how to read and think critically, then they're going to be more successful in their other courses. And that's the basis of AVID. So what AVID has done is they have written an entire curriculum around those strategies, and they teach the students this as they progress throughout AVID starting in middle school. Now, students who want to be an AVID, and that's the thing, they want their students to want to be an AVID, this is where it gets costly and a little bit different. You see, in order to have AVID, you have to have a teacher that's dedicated to teach it, and then he becomes your AVID teacher. And the students have to want to be an AVID. They have to interview, they have to have an application, there has to be a process to be in the course. And further, you have to give up an elective for it. So if there's other things that student wants to do, they kind of have to give those things up in order to be in the AVID classroom. The other thing about AVID, and this sort of makes it a scheduling nightmare sometimes for administrators as they don't like it, is you have to be in an advanced class. See, that's the thing that AVID promotes, and the idea is that these bubble kids or these kids that could slip through the cracks often don't get identified for taking advanced courses at a school because of maybe their background, their low income, whatever it is. So AVID's trying to break through that barrier by saying, no, these students should be in a rigorous classroom, in a rigorous environment, and the things that we're teaching them as a part of the AVID curriculum, they can apply it and use it in the advanced class, and they can be successful. So that's another part of it. So as you know, if a student qualifies or is in special education, they can't be an AVID student. There has to be students who are a little bit beyond special ed, but a little bit below those advanced kids. So again, focused on the bubble students. The other thing that I've always liked about AVID was their summer training or their AVID institutes. Now, to be an AVID teacher, you really kind of have to be in the system. You have to drink the Kool-Aid. And I say that flippantly because, man, people who are in AVID, they love it. They absolutely love it. They love the relationships, they love the curriculum, they love the teaching, they love the instruction, they love it all. And I will say that through the AVID institutes that I've been through, it is some of the best professional development that I have ever had when you go to some of these summer trainings. The way AVID does it is they kind of do it through levels and qualifying. So once you take a certain course, then you sort of move up to another course or a more advanced level. So that way you're not taking the same professional development over and over again, and you sort of move up through the AVID system and become sort of higher up in their badging is the kind of the way they do it. So you're not taking the same thing all the time. They're always progressing and changing their instruction, their curriculum, and the training you get every summer is different. Plus, you end up going to some pretty exotic places. The AVID has an institute in Honolulu, for example. They have some great places in California that they go. So, yeah, they go to some nice places. The other thing I can tell you about AVID, at least from the student perspective, is that the students often love it. The ones that stay with it throughout middle school and high school, and again, I've known some fabulous AVID teachers, and those relationships they build are absolutely powerful and very, very strong. But if you want to know for sure how impactful AVID can be for some students, I recommend you go to YouTube and Google AVID Cardboard Confessionals. And it's something that seniors do at the end of sort of their AVID graduation. They do this for parents, and parent nights are also part of AVID, to show what AVID has meant to them, where they were before they started, and where they're headed now. Because the idea, again, behind all of this is to get that bubble group to the next level. So AVID is real big on college readiness. They're real big about talking about colleges and making college a big part and present on the campus, the school campus, the classroom. You know you're on an AVID campus when you see college banners everywhere, college corners, those kind of things, because AVID really promotes the idea of an education beyond high school. Now, let's get to some of the detriments of AVID. One is cost. It's expensive. Back in the day when I was doing it, and this was over 15 years ago, the cost was around $40,000 for the site license and curriculum, and that doesn't count the training that you have to do, the travel, the professional development, and any other supplemental materials. I was also buying binders and other materials for my teachers to use because the binders didn't come cheap for some of those AVID students, and they needed that stuff to be successful in the class. So I was also buying materials for students. The cost is expensive. And because the cost is expensive, particularly when you add the training and the professional development to it, AVID is generally one of those programs that is cut across the board whenever schools start looking for things to remove from the budget because of its cost. So I don't know where AVID is these days as far as that is concerned, but I don't know if they've come down in their site licenses or whatever, but it can be expensive for school districts to use. AVID is also real big on expanding their reach beyond the AVID classroom. One thing that they look for on their campuses is they want there to be an AVID site committee of people who are not only just part of AVID, but people who aren't part of AVID, administrators, other teachers, counselors, that kind of thing, because the idea is to promote AVID school-wide. And AVID will actually come out and grade your campus to see if you are implementing AVID school-wide, parts of the AVID program if you're implementing it school-wide so that it touches other classes and that other teachers are doing things even though they aren't AVID. Cornell Notes is one of those examples. AVID would be looking for you using Cornell Notes throughout your school. And if you're doing that, then you can get that AVID school-wide designation and then ultimately become an AVID demonstration school where other people could come to your school and see how you're implementing AVID school-wide. It's one of those things that AVID really, really likes to see. Now, that's sort of the basis of AVID, that's sort of the basics, the 10,000-foot overview. And if you want to learn more, certainly go to AVID, and they have a website, and you can look it up. Or even think about your own local school district and see what they're doing with AVID. But in my time working with AVID for about 3 years and going to the trainings and working with the teachers, my one takeaway was, why aren't we doing these things for everybody? Why does AVID have to own the patent on these things? Because frankly, they don't. They own their patent on their curriculum, and they wrote it, and the way they do their instruction, and God bless them. Wonderful. I'm glad that you were able to find a niche in the education market to do those things. But you don't own the patent on reading, and you don't own the patent on collaboration or organization. Sure, you got a clever name, and you call it Wicker, and maybe you own the patent on that and posters and trademark and whatever. But if we just taught our teachers how to teach students to think critically or to organize or to collaborate or do any of these other things, we could raise all those ships pretty naturally without having to spend all this money to do it. That was always my lone takeaway from this, is that the things that we're doing here to teach these soft skills, just like that teacher noticed back in the 1980s, we could be doing that for everybody. What I would like to see more of out of our principals and our leadership and even our teacher leaders on campus is to find these deficits and recognize that it's not in standardized testing. That's not where it's at. It's in doing some of these soft skills. Our students still come to us lacking and needing some of these very important things. And if we spend some time teaching them how to organize, how to collaborate, how to ask questions, how to take notes, those soft skills are going to translate, and they're going to become more than what they came to us with. And isn't that the point of education? Is to take them to the next level beyond standardized testing, whether that's college education or trade school or whatever. Isn't that the point? So if we can bring them in, show them some of these soft skills, teach them how to think critically, how to read critically, we're going to raise all those ships naturally. And I don't think that we're going to need some expensive $40,000 site license. I think we can do it ourselves. And I think we can do it. It's October 2nd, 2024. It's Wednesday. Last night was the vice presidential debate. I watched a little bit of it. Actually, I listened to it on the radio. I was coming home from somewhere last night and had it on the radio. I was just listening to it. I don't have a lot of interest in the vice presidents. They don't do much. You know, everyone likes to pretend that vice presidents do something, and they really don't. They're just kind of there in case something happens to the president, and they might do something on the side, but trust me, the vice presidents really don't do anything at all. So to have a vice presidential debate is really kind of ridiculous, but whatever. And if you watched it or listened to it, you heard a lot of policy stuff. You know, it's a term we throw around. We throw around this word policy. So what is policy? Policy, in a sense, in a very, very basic standard sense, is the way we do things, the way we think something should be done, or the way that we have agreed that we're going to handle this situation or this event, whatever. So in politics, they throw around the term policy and like, this is the way we think we should handle immigration. This is the way we think we should handle education. This is the way we think we should handle the economy. So policy is the term that's sort of ubiquitous in the sense of how a group of people wants to do something. Now, you might notice that the other side has their own policy for immigration, education, economics, whatever that is. But in higher ed, or at least in education, policy is a little more grounded. It's something that is put on paper. You can find it on websites in a sense that the way we do things, or the way we need to do things, is more collaborative. And it's respective of people. For example, academic freedom. You've heard me talk about academic freedom quite frequently because it's so important to what professors do in higher education. There is a policy for academic freedom. Not too long ago, I think it was the last legislative session, being part of a public university, of course, the state of Texas is interested in what their tax dollars is funding. And one of the things that they're not always comfortable with is professors being able to say and do whatever they want. And the reason why is because politicians and business type people, they don't live in that world. There are consequences to running a bad business or having bad politics. Those people generally get fired or they don't get elected the next time the election rolls around. So those individuals who come from that world aren't used to a world where a professor can earn tenure, meaning once they have achieved a certain level of prominence with the university based upon a grounded set of policies and procedures, once that professor has passed those things, they earn something called tenure. Now, a tenure allows that professor to work continuously at the university in perpetuity, as long as they want to, and as long as there's money around to pay them. And sometimes with that tenure, and you've likely seen this on the news, you might find a professor who just goes rogue and says something controversial, whatever's on their mind, whatever they believe, or even worse, whatever their research says. That tends to bother politicians and businessmen who have maybe an interest financially or politically in that institution. So I challenge you, if you're bored, go out and Google, tenured professor says something dumb, and I'm sure you'll find some news story on it. Because the problem with tenure, at least in the eyes of those individuals, is you can't fire that professor for having a voice. They are protected. But in the realm of policy, let me get back to that. Tenure isn't just handed out to professors. They have to earn it. And they earn it through the teaching and the service and the research that I've constantly been talking about in my lectures. You have to demonstrate excellence in teaching. That is required. You have to be a great professor in how you teach. You have to publish. You have to show the university that you are publishing in good journals, not journals that make you pay to publish. That's bad. But journals that are peer-reviewed in your field, have been vetted, and that you are writing papers that are quality for those journals to publish and present. You're expected to do that. And then lastly, your service, not only to your department or your school or the university, but as I've mentioned, national service. As an ed leadership person, I go to ed leadership conferences. I go to AERA every single year, and I present and I work at that conference. I meet with people who are also ed leadership folks. We are called a special interest group. So I'm part of a special interest group, and we go and we talk and we do things. I also chair roundtables with other professors who are coming up in the field. I listen to their research. I give them feedback. That's national service. Because I am an expert in my field, I am expected to go out and give that expertise to other people. That is how we grow our body of knowledge. It's how we grow future professors. It's part of it. But there is policy and procedure in place that is designed by my peers at the university to show that I am doing teaching, research, and service. And that policy is in place for me to look at and review and make sure that I am on track for earning that tenure. As of this moment, as of this video, October 2nd, 2024, I have not yet earned my tenure. I am working towards that tenure, actually go up next year. And what's going to happen is I'm going to write this long dossier, and I'm going to attach to it a lot of artifacts, things that I have done to demonstrate to my peers at Texas Women's University that I deserve or should earn tenure. Now, my colleagues are going to look at it, and they're going to evaluate my work, my dossier, my artifacts, my evidence against a prescribed set of standards that is grounded in a policy that was long written before I got here and is reviewed often to make sure that it meets 2024 standards. Now, that group of my peers is going to measure my dossier against that policy, and they're going to make a recommendation. Hopefully, they'll say yes. Yes, he has met our standard, our policy. And then it's going to go to another level. It's going to go to my department chair. And he's going to look at it, and he's going to measure it against the exact same policy, and he's going to say yes or no. And if he says yes, which I hope he will, then he's going to take it to my dean. And then my dean's going to do the exact same thing, except another layer has been added. Does it meet the standards of the college or the school? Hopefully my dean will say yes. And then after my dean says yes, guess what? It goes to the provost, the academic person who leads our university. And then she's going to look at it. And she's going to make a decision if I am the kind of professor that Texas Women's University wants to keep and wants to have for a long, long, long time. Because I am invested in this school, and this school is invested in me. Am I the kind of professor that they want to continue having me doing this level of educational leadership research, this level of podcast pedagogy, and this level of mental health work for teachers? Because that's what I do. So she's going to look at it, and she's going to say yes or no. And then she's going to take it to our chancellor. The chancellor is going to look at it and go, wow, all these experts have looked at this. I agree with them or I disagree with them. And then she's going to make a decision. And then guess what? It goes to another level. It goes to our Board of Regents. The Board of Regents for Texas Women's University. Now, the Board of Regents is appointed by the governor of the state of Texas. And that is how the state of Texas ensures that every professor across all the public universities are meeting a set standard for tenure and promotion at universities. So you see what I have to go through, and it is a year-long process in order for me to demonstrate that I deserve or I have earned tenure. Now, a couple of legislative sessions ago, as I mentioned before this rant, there were some politicians who wanted to step in to make sure that everybody had raised their standard for tenure and promotion, because there was a concern that some public universities were just handing it out like it's some sort of gift. And there have been states in the United States who have been looking to make tenure a lot harder to get or take it away completely, which is a bad idea. You see, academic freedom and earning tenure is important for professors because we can't have politicians and business leaders telling us what we can and can't research. What we do is important work, and research is a part of us advancing the body of knowledge for all of our disciplines. We can't have politicians worried about what research is going to say. You've already seen this with the climate change research. There are a lot of people who don't like what climate change research is saying. And you're even seeing to a point where, yeah, maybe those researchers don't really know what they're talking about. Well, that's not true. Maybe you just don't like what research is telling you. And research is asking you to make some changes that you're not comfortable doing, or it's going to cost you money to make. That's just one example of how tenure can be upsetting to some people because of what higher ed does. We produce knowledge, and then we teach that knowledge, and we share it with others. And sometimes that conversation is really, really tough to have. So going back to policy and ethics, you can see how all of these things connect, how important it is to make sure that wherever you are and wherever you work, that it is grounded in a policy, a set of rules and procedures and how we do things. So whenever you get that first job in higher education or wherever it is that you intend to work, my advice for you is find your policies. What are you saying you are going to do? What are you saying how you're going to do these things? Who's responsible for these things? Revisit these policies on a regular basis. Because one thing that's bad about policy is that it doesn't necessarily get shared with everybody. So then people come and go, and then you lose sight of who's supposed to be doing what job, and you don't have it written down anywhere. So you want to revisit your policies on a regular basis to make sure that everybody's in the loop and everybody knows their job and knows their responsibility. So take some time, if you're really interested in policy and how it works, go through some websites, look some things up. You'll see a lot of policies written in HR, because the real point of policy is, what do we do when this situation occurs? How do we make sure that people are treated fairly and equitably? And how do we document the process to make sure that if this happens again, we do it right? That's really what policy is. Interviewing for that first job can be tough and it can be stressful. But if you were prepared and you've got some tips and tricks in your back pocket, you can set yourself apart from a lot of candidates. So take it from someone who's been interviewing people now in education for the last 25 years. I've got a few tips and tricks that I think would be helpful for you when you're ready for interviewing for your first job in a school or in higher education. So here are Dr. B's tips and tricks for that first big interview. All right, number one, it should be obvious, but you need to do your homework. Wherever you're working, you need to be doing some preemptive research about the organization or the school or wherever it is that you've applied for to understand a little bit more about the job. I would read the job description thoroughly. I'd get on their website and look at the people who work in the department or the school or wherever and learn some faces, learn some names if you possibly can, because you're going to be seeing these people in the interview. But also, be looking a little deeper. Maybe check the news, see what's going on with the school or the university, maybe the department, if they got some grants that you might be able to talk about. So doing a little bit of homework about the organization, the school, the higher ed, whatever it is that you're applying for. Learn about the job. Learn about where you intend to work. Because in a sense, you're also sort of interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, and it really is all about best fit. So doing your homework on the front end, you might find out some things about the place that you're just not interested in, or take that into the interview to get more information. So do some homework before your interview, take some good notes, and learn more about the place you might be potentially working at. Number two, it might seem silly, but bring water. Have a little bottle of water handy. They may not give you water when they're there. If they're smart, they will, and if they have it available, hopefully they'll offer it to you. But don't assume that they will. And the last thing you want is to get caught into a horrible coughing fit while you're in the middle of an amazing answer to a question. You don't want to do that. So have some water available. Bring it with you. Keep it in your bag. Keep it in your purse. Keep it wherever. That way you can grab it and drink it. If they offer it to you, then great. You don't need to use your water. But trust me, you don't want to get busted with a dry mouth from talking for an hour that you're not prepared for. So have some water available, especially if they don't offer some to you. Number three, eye contact. And I say this one because likely you're going to be in one of those panel interviews that have 4 or 5 people in it. Very rarely do we have these one-on-one interviews anymore, which I kind of prefer, but I'm an old school guy in that sense. But these days, a lot of interviews are collaborative, have 4, 5, 6 people in a panel where everybody likes to go around and ask questions. So try to place yourself at the table or wherever, the conference room or wherever you are, so that you can see everyone and you can scan the room while you're answering questions. Now, a really good technique is focus on the person who asked the question, whoever that person is, and primarily focus your attention there, but be sure that you're scanning the room, talking with everybody. You want to make it look conversational in that sense, because while you are being asked questions and it is an interview, make it into a conversation. Talk a little bit. And you wouldn't want to just direct your attention to one singular person while doing that. So while you're talking to 4, 5, 6 people, scan the room, make sure you're making eye contact with everybody while you're answering the question. It's just good practice. Bring something to take notes. You want to write something down. Bring a pen. Bring a notebook. You want to take notes during the interview. Write down questions that you're asked. The reason why you want to do this is because if you're applying to multiple jobs at multiple places and the job descriptions are similar, you want to get an idea of the kinds of questions that you're being asked. And this gives you an opportunity then after the interview to reflect on the questions you were asked, just in case you didn't give a good answer or you didn't like the answer that you gave. This gives you a chance to reflect and think more deeply about what kind of person are they looking for. Further, if you get called in for a second interview, and just in case you're a finalist for a position, in particular in higher ed, this likely could happen. You might get asked this question again in a different way or in a deeper way where they want you to really expand on your answer. So make sure that you take notes of the things that are said, take notes on the things that you say. Write down the questions that you're asked. You might want to learn to do some sort of shorthand or some dictation or something these days that most people don't do. But you don't want to sit down and write down word for word what you're being asked. That takes a long time. But especially if they don't give you the questions. Sometimes they'll give you the questions, but most of the time they don't. So you'll want to take notes, write down the things that you hear so that you can go back later and reflect on your answers and think more deeply about what you said so you can give a more powerful answer if you're asked a similar question next time. Number 5, be humble. A long time ago when I watched American Idol, and I don't watch American Idol anymore, but Simon Cowell at the time was one of the judges, and his whole shtick is to, be rude and be mean and just be brutally honest, and that's cool. That's his whole thing. But I was watching an episode, and he said something that really struck me, and I never forgot it because it resonated in the realm of the American Idol, judging thing, which was he was talking to this candidate, this person, they're singing their guts out, and they think that they're the greatest and all this other stuff, as many of them think that they are. I mean, they're on TV, right? And they want to be the next pop star. So, but what Simon Cowell said to this person was, do you think you're as good as Katy Perry? Because that's who you're competing with. You're competing with Katy Perry. And what he was really trying to say was that's the realm that you're trying to get into. You are going to be producing music and singing and marketing and trying to compete with record sales with somebody who is far more successful and likely much, much better than you are, American Idol contestant. So in the realm of education, I was thinking at how it compares, at least. Everyone has a master's degree. Everyone likely has a doctorate, depending on the higher ed job you're applying for. So if everybody comes in with the same standards that the job description is asking for, you need to figure out what sets you apart. And you need to be humble in that. Because everybody who's applied for this job and everybody who has gotten an interview has already met that standard. The reality is that if you've got the interview, you've already passed a lot of tests with the committee and the hiring people that want you there for that interview. There's already something in your cover letter, your vita, your resume that already sets you apart. So what is it? You have got to do something to set yourself apart even more than the rest of the people that are coming to that interview. Because everybody is coming in with the exact same standard. And I can't tell you how many times I see on social media or LinkedIn or have been in these interviews where people think it's just enough to have had that master's or to have X amount of years of experience, whatever. You're not special. Be humble. You're competing with other people who have fabulous careers. So what part of your career is going to set you apart when you step into that interview? So that's something that you need to be thinking about, particularly for our next point, which is number 6, be ready with some of those stories to tell. It's always good to have about 2 or 3 stories about yourself that are going to set you apart from everybody else. And the best way to do this is while you're being asked the questions during the course of the interview, and you will likely be asked 8, 9, 10 questions, look for those opportunities during the interview to insert those stories about you, something you've done in your career, something you're proud of, project you've been involved with, community things you've done, grants that you've written, something that is going to say, I am invested in this career. I am invested in this job. Here is what I bring to the table. Let me give you some examples. So it's always a good practice to be thinking about where you can insert some of those great stories about yourself. And the best way to do it is to try to tie it to an answer that you're giving during an interview by, giving an answer and then saying, for example, I was a part of this group and we did this, this, and this. It's an opportunity to really showcase and show the committee that you have done the work that they're asking you to do. So be ready with about 2-3 stories about yourself that you think are powerful and will set you apart from the other people who are interviewing and probably interviewing that day. Number 7, be relaxed. But be relaxed in the sense that you belong there. You kind of want to act like, yeah, I could work here, and be real relaxed about it. If you're stiff, if you're sweating, if you're unsure of yourself, if you show any hint of a lack of confidence, that's going to come across in your interview. But if you can walk in with a sense of, I deserve this interview, and this is a place I could see myself working, and these are people that I could see myself working with. If you come in with that attitude and you're a little more relaxed in how you answer and you talk and explaining things, it's going to come across that, you do kind of belong here. And people will get that sense of maybe I could build a relationship with this person, I could collaborate with this person, I can work with this person. Now, of course, always be professional and don't be too relaxed like you would with friends of yours or on social media. You wouldn't want to do that. But you do want to give them a sense that, I do belong here. I got this interview. Have that sense of confidence and be relaxed, and you'll do great. Number 8, ask questions. There's going to come a time in the interview, likely at the end, where they're going to turn to you and say, well, that's all the questions we have. What questions do you have for us? It's a pretty standard thing that a lot of people end their interviews with. Even if they don't, you want to go ahead and ask some questions yourself. So as part of your preparation, you want to have probably 2 really good quality follow-up questions to ask. Now, you can ask these follow-up questions based upon things you heard in the interview, but I'm going to give you 2 quality questions to ask that generate some conversation that will help you. And the first one is, what are your challenges this year? Now, that is a great open-ended question. It gives everybody on the committee a chance to think about their school, the university, the department, whatever, and think about what are those challenges. The thing that you should remember is that the people that are on this interview are likely some of the leaders of the department or the school. They've been selected for this, so they know a little bit more than your average everyday person that works wherever you're applying. So they're going to know some things, and it gives them a chance to really talk about their school or the department or wherever and think about what those challenges are. The other advantage to this question is that it gives some time to really have some conversation, to chat a little bit, and if you haven't had a chance to insert one of those personal stories that I mentioned earlier, this is a really good place to do it. If you couldn't find a question to sort of insert things that you want to talk about, this is the time to do it. You can attach your question or your story as a part of this conversation. So that's one really good question. Another good question to ask is, I noticed your data says, or I noticed your website says, or I noticed something about your school that says, I was wondering, blah, 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 blah. Okay? You're going to have to fill in some blanks on that one. But as you're doing your homework, as we said in number 1, if you notice something, you see something interesting, you want to call that out. It's a way of showing everyone, hey, I've looked into you and I've noticed that what you're doing here is really, really great. I've noticed your reading scores are up. I noticed you got that fabulous grant. Tell me more about that. Boom. Now you've given them a chance to talk about themselves. You've given them a chance to brag a little bit about their school. And believe me, mentally, psychologically, people love to talk about themselves. So if you can ask a question where they get to talk a little bit about themselves, they're going to remember you above everyone else who interviewed because you gave them a chance to talk about them. They love talking about them. Man, that's great. I was really, really talking, and I like talking about me. I like that person. So any kind of question where you can give them a chance to talk about themselves, great question. And again, it gives you an opportunity to insert one of those personal anecdotes, personal stories that shows them that you can contribute to this school or this department in some sort of awesome way. So that's Dr. B's 8 tips for interviewing. I wish you the best. I wish you luck if you're going out for that interview. I hope these help, and like, subscribe, tell us what you think, if any of these worked for you, and I hope that they did. So good luck to you in that great interview coming up.